My name is Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive. Each week we bring you the real stories behind the headlines, and today we have a story about what the real criminal justice system in America is like. We're going to be talking about the Kerry Max Cook story. Stay tuned. You're going to love it.
There's no question there are innocent people on Texas's death row. It doesn't matter if it's a blue state or a red state. Right. There are innocent people on death row around the country.
Both those that want to be prosecutors and those that want to be defense attorneys, I encourage them to follow the law and do justice in these cases. I think that we forget sometimes that that's really what we should be seeking.
There have been times when prosecutors would call people who I've quoted, or they'll call them to see if what I had documented was true, or if they knew that the person was charged or convicted of a crime. They were checking up to see how much of my reports were truthful.
My first guest on this show is a remarkable lawyer from Houston, Texas, Paul Nugent.
Good to see you, Steve.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Steve.
He's with the law firm of Foreman, DeGarris, and Nugent. Is that correct?
Foreman, DeGarris, and Nugent. That's right, Steve.
And what is your website, by the way?
It's ForemanDeGarrisandNugent.com.
Okay, and you have a telephone number down there?
Yes, 713-655-9000.
Yeah. When anybody says to me they don't like lawyers, I automatically think of all the good lawyers like you that spend so many countless hours trying to help people who have been wrongfully convicted. And one of those persons that you had a big case was Kerry Max Cook, right?
Yeah, Kerry spent 20 years on death row and then was exonerated by DNA.
And how is Kerry getting along these days?
You know, it's a tough adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Kerry's my age, Steve. He's 50 years old and spent 21 years of his life in prison, 20 of that on death row. But he's adjusting. It's tough, but he's written a book, and
yeah, there's a new book out. It's called Chasing Justice, right?
Yeah, and it was very, I think, therapeutic for Kerry because death row is a horrible place. It's a really horrible place if you're innocent, like Kerry was. Sure. And I think the book has helped Kerry get some of those feelings out.
How does a system that we have, which is pretty good, probably the best system in the world, right, in terms of justice?
I believe so.
How does a system how does this happen in a system like ours?
The thing to keep in mind, Steve, it's an industry. It's the criminal justice industry, and the industry is imperfect. It really is. Mistakes are made. And the death penalty is a government program. Mistakes are made in the administration of the death penalty, and in Kerry's case there were huge mistakes, prosecutorial misconduct, and an innocent person was convicted. And we just have to keep in mind, in America, if we want to have the death penalty, we need to be honest and say it's an imperfect system. Innocent people will, to some degree, be convicted.
We all read in the newspapers of wrongfully convicted people. I think Barry Scheck's now, his Innocence Project's gotten like 190 people off out of prison. Not all on death row, but out of prison. Some states provide compensation. You know, let's face it, you're locked up for 20 years, you've had everything taken away from you. What about the state of Texas?
Well, in Kerry's case, he's not going to get compensation. The district attorneys that committed the misconduct are never going to admit that they were wrong.
So they have to admit it for him to get compensation?
Essentially, that's correct.
What about the DNA evidence that points the finger without question at somebody else?
Well, in Kerry's case, the DNA clearly identifies the person who should be the prime suspect, but the law enforcement authorities in Texas will not go after the person who left the DNA at the crime scene because they would be admitting they made a mistake, and they don't have the courage to admit they made a mistake.
Well, this has got to be rectified some way. How do you see this rectified? I understand that his story may be made into a movie, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of interest in the story, and the thing to remember is Texas leads the United States in putting people on death row. Texas is the epicenter of the death penalty in this country, and the politicians, and district attorneys are politicians. We have to remember that. They are politicians first, attorneys second. It takes a very courageous politician to admit that they've almost executed an innocent man, and unfortunately we don't have that kind of courage.
Have you appealed to the governor, Rick Perry?
Our governor, unfortunately, is very pro-death penalty, and he's not going to admit that Kerry Max Cook was innocent. He wouldn't.
Even if the evidence undeniably, categorically shows that it was somebody else.
Well, the problem, Steve, is for the state of Texas to admit they almost executed an innocent man, Kerry Max Cook, it would put the death penalty in Texas in jeopardy, and there's very strong support among the politicians for the death penalty in Texas, and they will not admit they made a mistake.
You mean like in the case of Illinois, George Ryan, the former governor, commuted everybody's sentence on death row because there were 17 examples, I think, of people who had been wrongfully convicted and then exonerated. In other words, there could be more innocent people sitting on death row.
Sure, there's no question there are innocent people on Texas's death row. It doesn't matter if it's a blue state or a red state.
Right.
There are innocent people on death row around the country.
You did this case on a pro bono basis, right?
That's correct.
In other words, you weren't paid to do this, were you?
I tried it twice. Each trial was about 2 months. Took it up to the United States Supreme Court. At the end, we did receive some compensation, but the first 6 years were pro bono, and you know, I was honored to have the chance to try to save someone's life, and I was convinced Kerry Max Cook was innocent, and I was honored that he placed his life in my hands and trusted me.
How do you... There's not a lot of lawyers that would have done what you have done, right?
Well, you know, I've been against the death penalty since I was a kid.
And you're a fellow Texan, right?
That's right, and I believe we have better alternatives, but I'm very committed to representing innocent people, and I can't think of a worse thing than executing an innocent man. So
Right.
we worked hard to exonerate Kerry.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next few moments, but I want to bring up our next guest who worked with you, Scott Howe. So stick around. We're going to have you back in a minute.
All right.
And thanks for sharing.
Thank you, Steve.
And my next guest is a professor at the Chapman University School of Law. Is that correct?
That's right.
Scott
Yes.
Howe.
Nice to meet
Welcome
you,
to the
Steve.
show.
Thank you so much.
Scott, you're not only a professor, but you also were very much involved with the Kerry Max Cook case, weren't you?
That's correct,
You're originally
yes.
from Texas.
Right.
What was your role that you played with Paul Nugent and just the whole case?
Well, Kerry was convicted of murder, first-degree murder, and sentenced to death, and he was on death row for a number of years. His conviction was affirmed on appeal. Then he had no lawyer. I worked for the Southern Center for Human Rights, and we represented folks on death row who needed attorneys.
Okay, let me stop you right there. It was affirmed by the Texas
Court of Criminal Appeals.
which means that basically they said, yeah, this guy should be executed, right?
That's right.
So you work for...
I worked for the Southern Center for Human Rights out of Atlanta, Georgia, and we tried to get involved in cases where folks did not have an attorney. Kerry did not have a lawyer.
So the only reason you even got involved with this case is because he didn't have a lawyer.
That's
Not
right.
because he was innocent or guilty or whatever.
No, I had no idea about his
Okay.
case. I went to see Kerry. We tried to match inmates up with law firms.
Right.
I had a long conversation with Kerry. He asked me if I would take his case myself, and I liked him a lot. There was a real attachment, and I said I would do it. So I stayed in his case myself.
What was it about his case, about talking with him, that influenced you to want to take this case? I mean, he was just telling you his side of the story, which
Yes.
could have been, you know, fabricated, right?
Right. Well, he was a very engaging guy. He kept telling me he was innocent of the crime. And of course, that's something that folks in trouble often say to you when you're
Sure.
a defense lawyer.
I
but
didn't do it.
I didn't do it, but I really sensed there was something different about this case. And when I started investigating it a little bit, I came to the conclusion that there were problems.
One of the big problems was prosecutorial misconduct, right?
It was very clear to me there was some
For our
problems.
viewers, when we say prosecutorial misconduct, what we're talking about is the prosecutor illegally did things, right?
That's right.
He broke the law.
That's right.
What exactly did the prosecutor do?
Well, it was a combination of things. It was the failure to disclose evidence to the defense that the law requires be disclosed, and it was also really the manufacturing of evidence that was not real. That is,
specifically, like what?
well, there was a witness who had been in the jail that Kerry was incarcerated in, who was a snitch, who claimed to have heard Kerry confess. It later turned out that person recanted and said it was all a lie. He was in jail himself on a murder charge.
So that person was like a primary witness.
Absolutely.
Against Kerry.
Absolutely.
Which helped convict him.
Yes, sir. That's right.
And he was in each trial?
Well, he testified in the first trial.
Right.
He recanted after the first trial, and he did not testify in the second trial.
Anything happened to him after he said he lied?
Well, he...
I like to use these words rather than recanted. He lied, right?
He lied.
Okay.
He
What
lied.
other things did this prosecutor do? And by the way, what is the name of that prosecutor? He's now a judge, isn't he?
Well, the original prosecutor was a guy named Michael Thompson, who committed suicide a few weeks after Kerry's trial.
And
That's
why
right.
did he commit suicide?
That I can't say why,
Okay.
but he certainly in this case had done things that were inappropriate. Absolutely,
kidding.
absolutely.
And then the next one was a gentleman by the name of Jack.
Jack Skeen was the
Yeah.
subsequent
Well, I understand
prosecutor.
now as a judge down
That's
in
right.
Tyler, Texas, right?
That's right.
And who committed the most illegal acts here?
Well, the first trial was really horrendous in terms of prosecutorial misconduct, and I think that it would have been appropriate for the prosecutors to admit that first trial was unfair. That
Nothing would have happened to him anyway because they have immunity, right?
Well, that's true. That's true. Nothing would have happened, but they did not do that. They continued to claim that Kerry was guilty. They took this case all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States,
Right.
and it was only there that we got a reversal and got it sent back.
So you were with Kerry in terms of his case for how many years?
I was with Kerry for about 4 years.
4 years. He had already been in jail for 16, right?
That's true. That's
Jeez,
true.
That
yes.
must really wear on a person.
Well, when I met Kerry, he weighed about 120 pounds. He was emaciated. He really had been through a torturous experience, no question about
Now,
it.
you teach at Chapman University, right?
I do.
What type of law do you teach?
I teach criminal law, criminal procedure, and a course on the death penalty.
Do you encourage a lot of your students to seek out cases where they can set the record straight, to get justice for those wrongfully accused?
Absolutely, absolutely. Both those that want to be prosecutors and those that want to be defense attorneys, I encourage them to follow the law and do justice in these cases. I think that we forget sometimes that's really what we should be seeking.
Why did the foreman, DeGuerin Nugent firm take the case? It was because of your convincing argument?
It was really because they are great people, and Paul
Right.
Nugent is a tremendous lawyer and has a commitment to justice.
We're going to have you back on a panel. I'm going to have Paul and you talking more specifically about this case, but I'm going to introduce our next guest, who's a criminologist, and I want to thank you for
Thanks so much.
being on the show.
Thank you,
and
Steve.
stick around because we're going to have you back again.
Thank you very much.
We're going to talk about my next guest on this show is someone that I really didn't know existed, Dr. Sheila Balkan. Welcome to the show.
How do you do?
And when I say I really didn't know she existed, I'm really talking about her profession, which is you're defined as a criminologist, right?
That's right.
And you have a PhD in
I have a PhD in criminology,
criminology.
sociology and criminology.
And we've had long discussions about how you generally, let's say, help defendants who are accused of a crime, lessen their time that they're going to be incarcerated, and try to make let's say, a punishment that is more suiting, let's say, to their circumstances. Wouldn't you say that is true?
Yes, I would say that that was true.
Right, and generally, as the process goes along, there is somebody similar to you on the prosecution side, usually the probation department, that will write a sentencing recommendation, won't they?
Yes.
And that sentencing recommendation generally is something that's not the most favorable impression.
That's correct. It's a very limited report. It just focuses on the offense conduct, what that person is.
Not who they are.
Exactly.
And that's where you come in, right?
Yes.
And I understand that every lawyer in town has your phone number, your website, because when they need the best, you are the best, right?
Well, thank you very much.
Well, I've heard that from many different lawyers.
That's
You have
very
a
nice.
website that you can give out to our audience?
My website is drbalkan.com, www.drbalkan.com.
And when we were talking before, we were talking about the system. The system likes to put people away, basically. You get convicted, put them away forever, throw away the key. You do some miraculous things, and you do that because in a system where you actually meet with the client first, don't you?
Yes.
You really find out a little bit about them, right?
I find out a lot about them.
A lot about them. So you're able to make a recommendation, write a report, which you share with who?
My reports will go to, depending on the case and what the attorney wants, my reports will either go to the court or they will go to the prosecutor and sometimes the probation officer.
And how do they usually receive it?
In writing, it's a long, detailed report.
I mean, you know, their attitude when they receive it.
Their attitude. Well, I'm often not there when they get it, but do they read it? Generally, yes.
But they read it for a reason that is totally opposite of why you wrote the report, isn't it? They want to disprove things, don't they?
Prosecutor often does.
So they'll call people up and say, what?
There have been times when prosecutors would call people who I've quoted or talked to about the defendant, and they'll call them to see if what I had documented was true, or if they knew that the person was charged or convicted of a crime. They were checking up to see how much of my reports were truthful, honest.
So if you're a defendant and you've been accused of something, Dr. Sheila Balkan is the person that you might want to contact, have your lawyer contact, right? So possibly write a good report, more favorable and truthful about yourself, so you might be able to make the best of a worse situation, right?
Yes, that's true, but I don't just try to get people off.
Right, I understand.
My focus is on trying to help people change their lives.
Well, that brings up another point. Most of the people who are in jails today committed crimes while they were high, either on alcohol or drugs. So it seemed to me that one of the primary things that you'd want people to do is go into a diversion program, go into a rehabilitation program where they can address their addiction problems, right?
Yes.
What do you do with people who have been, you know, have been addicted for many, many years, have gone in and out of programs? I mean, do they ever get serious? Can they get serious? Is it the fact that they're facing 100 years in jail that now they're going to get serious? How is your approach? You know, what is your personal opinion with somebody who's been through the doors time and time again and hasn't been successful?
That is actually a very common scenario. It takes many times for a person with an addiction, often it's very common for someone to relapse and have to go through multiple treatment programs.
But the probation department and the prosecutor is going to say, this guy's had his chances. They're going to say that, aren't they?
They do say that.
And how do you counter that?
Because what I do is give much more in-depth information about a person and their background. I talk to a lot of people. I get a lot of documentation. I look at their educational history, their whatever they have, their military history. And I try to try to find the real deep, dark secrets that they have not shared, to try to identify why they have not been able to maintain sobriety. And the support network is really important. The follow-through is really important. Many people will do fine in treatment, and when they come out, they'll relapse because they isolate. They don't have that support network around them.
Right. And I understand that you're so good that a TV show or a TV pilot was made about you, right?
Yes, that's right.
Is that airing now, or is going to air, or what?
No, it's not going to air.
Okay, because you really know the secrets of how to help people out. I mean, you successfully, do you follow up people after they get, you know, get out of the system? Do you follow up with any of them?
I often follow up with people. They keep in touch with me. I've worked on over 6,000 cases in the last 27 years.
Well, and your office is in Santa Monica. You want to give your website out again, please?
It's www.drbalkan.com.
You're the friend of the defendant to help them out, right?
I guess I am.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for being on our show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. And I hope to have you back again. I want to welcome back my guests on this show, Paul Nugent and Scott Howe. We're going to talk mainly about the Kerry Max Cook case, because this show is all about the criminal justice system in America today, which is, let's get this straight, it's a good system. There are some screw-ups, aren't there?
Absolutely.
We have an opportunity to right wrongs, as both of you did. And I understand that you initially had the first contact with Kerry, is that right?
That's right. I met Kerry back in February of 1988. His conviction had been and death sentence had been affirmed by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. He had no attorney. He was on death row. He hadn't talked to an attorney in a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I went down to death row and met him and agreed to take his case.
And when you say you met him, how do you meet someone on death row? What's the procedure?
You know, I had several folks that I was supposed to meet and talk to that day on death row, and so I went into the prison.
Went into a room with them?
Actually, no. You're not in the same room. You're not able to touch them. There's a metal screen, a very dark screen between you and the inmate, so you have no physical contact with them.
And you're under supervision of the jail there, right?
Yes, there are guards that are observing from a distance the entire interview.
Your client's essentially in a cage. They
Right.
sit in cages, basically. It's kind of a...
Now, once you were convinced that Kerry was innocent, you went to Paulsboro?
That's right. You know, Kerry, we first took his case to the Supreme Court. We got a reversal. We had to re-argue it in the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. They reversed the conviction. He was going to be retried. At that point, it was important for Kerry to have an outstanding trial attorney. Paul Nugent was one of the best trial attorneys in Texas, and I was delighted that he was willing to take on Kerry's case.
Thank God.
Absolutely.
Thank God. You know, there's basically, this is just a remarkable case, but I want to explain to our viewers something that I think Kerry explained to me. In 1998, rather than going to a fourth trial, he was given an opportunity to walk out of jail.
That's right.
But he had to sign something first, which was
What Kerry did was he agreed on the eve of the fourth trial to plead no contest, and he was released. He walked out.
To a charge.
To a charge of murder.
Yeah.
Now, but Kerry did not. Kerry's told me, he said, Paul, I will go back to death row before I lie. I will never say I'm guilty. I will go back to death row, and he meant it. And the prosecutor said, you have to say you're guilty. Kerry said, there's no way, I'm innocent, I will not say I'm guilty. Then the prosecutors backed down, they capitulated, they said, okay, you can plead no contest. So Kerry made no admission of guilt, pled no contest, his case was over. About 3 weeks later, the DNA exonerated him. So after he pled no contest with no admission of guilt, the science exonerated him.
Right, well, and that's the important thing I want to bring out, because I think this is kind of like, a lot of people don't know about this. He pled no contest.
That's right.
Specifically, what does no contest without the admission of guilt mean in legal terms?
No contest, simply put, means I'm not saying, I'm not contesting the case, I'm not admitting I did it, but I'm not contesting the case.
Okay.
The reason Kerry did that was...
So he could get out.
Get out. And it was a fourth trial.
Right.
There was a risk there would be more prosecutorial misconduct.
Yeah.
There was a risk he'd be falsely convicted again, and it's not worth it playing Russian roulette with your life.
Right, I want to ask both of you, why 3 weeks later, you say, evidence suddenly appeared that exonerated him? The DNA, the evidence existed, right?
That's right.
It existed. Where was it during the last 20 years?
The district attorney's office for 21 years had semen that they found on the woman's panties.
And they were aware of it?
They were aware of it. The woman was allegedly raped, then she was murdered. The district attorney's office had semen that was on her panties. They didn't tell the defense that there was any semen.
You guys didn't know anything about it? Did you know? You didn't know anything about it even when he signed this no contest plea, right?
No, before the fourth trial, the district attorney's office made it known that they had semen on the panties. We were ecstatic. We knew the semen would scientifically exonerate Kerry.
Yeah.
We urged that it be tested. The judge would not postpone the trial. He said, we're not going to wait on the DNA.
Isn't anybody interested in justice here?
Well, you know, with the...
Where is this? Tyler, Texas?
Well,
I'm never visiting Tyler.
you know, when a human life is at stake, you would think
Yeah.
Justice would be paramount.
Why in this particular case? Is this the same judge that was the prosecutor before?
Well, no. To the judge's credit, he did grant Kerry a bond. He accepted a no contest plea, but it would have been... We should have been able to wait until we had the scientific results, because Kerry was scientifically exonerated by DNA after he pled no contest.
Now that the DNA evidence has exonerated him, do you have a message you want to give the governor of Texas right now?
Well, the message is mistakes are made and mistakes will continue to be made. If we're going to endorse capital punishment, we need to be very careful that innocent people like Kerry Max Cook are not put on death row.
So specifically, your message to the governor would be, Kerry Max Cook is innocent. He
Sure.
was exonerated.
Absolutely.
You need to pardon him, right?
Kerry needs a pardon, and
And that's the only way that it can be expunged from his record, right?
That's true.
that's right. That's right. And I would ask Governor Perry to do the right thing and pardon Kerry.
When you've obviously sent a petition up there.
Well,
Or
in
letter.
Texas, to get a pardon, you have to get the trial judge and the district attorney's office to agree. The prosecutors in this case were embarrassed. They were embarrassed because they were caught lying and
Right.
cheating. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, when they reversed Kerry's conviction in 1996, said the prosecution engaged in fraud.
Yeah.
They found 15 years of systematic, intentional prosecutorial misconduct. So
ruining someone's life.
yeah, convicting an innocent man, railroading an innocent man. So the prosecution was embarrassed. There's no way they're going to join in a petition for a pardon.
Well, let me ask you a question. North Carolina, Duke University. You have a prosecutor down there named Mike Nefong.
Sure.
Okay. He apparently withheld evidence, right?
Right.
He has been relieved from his job yet? He's being investigated by the state, correct? By
Sure.
the bar administration. How come it's not happening to these prosecutors in the state of Texas?
Well, Steve, you know, it's an irony. One of the prosecutors who was found to have committed prosecutorial misconduct in Kerry's case, his peers later named him Prosecutor of the Year. So that's what we have to be careful of. You know, who's guarding the guards? Who's
Yeah.
prosecuting the prosecutors? The answer is nobody.
Do you feel any repercussions if you were to make this? I mean, the reason we have this show is to bring to light a great injustice that's occurring even now. Even now. This man needs a pardon.
He does.
This man needs some compensation, some apologies, something from the state of Texas. And the prosecutor, who I understand is now a judge, needs to be taken to task for this, doesn't he? I mean, in real life.
Well, there should
he
be.
should be held accountable, correct?
Yes, I think that terrible mistakes were made in this case. I know it's difficult to admit that a mistake of this magnitude has been made,
Yeah.
but it's very important. It's very
I
important.
had Linda Fairstein on my show. You know who she is? She was the
Sure.
prosecutor for the sex crimes unit in New York. A lot of the Law and Order Special Victims stories are based on her actual cases. And she writes books now. She's a best-selling author. What impressed me the most about her was the fact that she will fight as hard to exonerate someone based on DNA evidence as she will to prosecute them.
That's important.
You know, and I think, I wish this could happen. I don't know how it can happen.
The public wants accountability, and you're absolutely correct, Steve, that when a prosecutor gets caught engaging in fraud, when a prosecutor gets caught lying and cheating, there needs to be an investigation, there needs to be accountability. Otherwise, the public's going to lose confidence in our criminal justice system.
Well, I want to thank both of you
Thank
for
you
coming
very
here
much.
today, for sharing Kerry's story, for the fine work that you've been doing. It's been an honor to have you on the show, and keep coming back, and I'll be seeing you in Houston. So
Well, thank you, Steve.
thank you very much, Scott.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you. It's our
I was
pleasure.
in trouble while you told me. In charge. Thank you for joining us. We bring you special guests, special stories behind the headlines, and you can catch this once again at www.insiderexclusive. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.